to the path of my deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I'm calling your name, oh Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another live episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm Arqam Rashid, your host. Domestic violence is a very real problem that people face across the globe, and sometimes others try to deny this and try to act like as if it doesn't even exist. Many times in the Muslim community we find that it is frowned upon if somebody wants to come out and speak about the issues that they are facing at home. And this shouldn't be the case. If somebody is facing any sort of domestic violence, whether it be physical or it be some sort of emotional blackmail, they should come out and speak to somebody that can help them. So this is what we want to deal with today on this episode. So let's start off as usual by introducing our panel for today. On my right hand side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
I'm Omar Khalid, I'm an Egyptian citizen. I work in programming in one of the channels and also in translation.
Alright, welcome to the show, Omar. It's lovely to have you on. We have you on quite often and we enjoy the conversation with you.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Next to him, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Well, my name is Wael Waba. I was born in the States. I lived for a while in the States, and then I lived for a while in Egypt. I'm kind of back and forth right now. I'm stationed in Cairo, Egypt. I'm a CPA and an MBA, and I'm seeking knowledge within the Islamic studies, and currently I work as a financial consultant.
Alright, Wael, we love to have your expertise on the show. I mean,
Thanks.
you're combining secular education with Islamic knowledge, which is very good. So once again, welcome.
Thank
to
you. I
the show.
appreciate it. Thanks.
If I can come over to this side, brother, if we can get your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
Well, my name is Muhammad Al-Hamshari, and I'm Egyptian. I work in Egypt. I lived in the Gulf first, and I had my education in the Gulf, and then I came to Egypt for practicing medicine. I'm a psychiatrist, actually, and I've been specialized in psychiatry for about 8 years right now. And I'm working in a private hospital.
Okay, and
Yeah.
Muhammad, you're like perfect for the show.
Yeah.
We're going to be depending on you a lot today, so
I hope so, yeah.
I hope you came prepared, because we're going to throw a lot of questions at you,
Inshallah,
inshallah.
I'll try to do my best.
Once again, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Brother, next time, if we can get your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
My name is Idris. I'm from the States, close to your home, actually. And I'm here teaching, learning Arabic and memorizing Quran and teaching English.
I thought you were going to say, I'm here teaching Arabic and learning English. Alright, Idris, it's wonderful having you on again. You usually join us every week for Let's Talk, and we enjoy these conversations. So once again, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Always a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you on as well. If we can start with a very basic question, guys. What is domestic violence? So let's try to pitch some ideas, trying to define what comes under domestic violence, or what can fall under domestic violence. Umar, if I can start with you, inshallah.
To my knowledge, domestic violence is not one category. There are different categories.
Of course.
It can be between spouses. It can be between like a father and his son, and so on, or a mother and his daughter, and her daughter and her son. And it's not only something like the first thing that comes to mind is physical. Maybe it's just physical abuse and hitting, or maybe sexual abuse. But sometimes it's also psychological. Of course, we have, mashallah, psychiatrists, so I'm not going to talk about this. But this part also is.
Last episode you were talking about psychology.
Oh yeah, now I can't. I'm going to be exposed, maybe. So maybe that's the main. These are the main categories.
Okay. Wael, what's your thoughts on this?
Actually, domestic violation is considered one of the major health problems which we are experiencing nowadays. It's considered a breach or a violation for women's rights as well. Usually, domestic violence comes with 5 forms. Either it's physical or sexual or emotional or psychological, or sometimes it's economic. According to recently published UN report back in January 2016, it the numbers are like really surprising. The 35%, meaning one in every 3 women, did experience some kind of domestic violence within her lifetime. 38% of women who have been murdered were actually murdered by their intimate partners. According to recent studies, usually there are like 5 major factors which actually contribute to the increase of domestic violence everywhere. First of all, low level of education and ignorance is one reason. Another reason is like this gender superiority feeling as far as female versus or male versus female. Troubled childhood is one of the reasons. Witnessing parents, common violence, harmful use or obsessive use of alcohol and drugs and so on.
Okay, Wa'il, that's very interesting, and I think we need to add something to that, or at least I want to add something to that, is about domestic violence that men face as well. I think that exists, and obviously, without a doubt, they don't balance out. I mean, men don't face domestic violence as much as women do,
Right.
but it is a fact that men also face domestic violence, and that they are less likely to come out and tell somebody that they're facing any sort of domestic violence. Muhammad, I'm going to come to you. You're the expert. What definition would you give us for domestic violence?
So I like the definition that Wa'il brought up, which it's actually very close to the definition in which we health experts go to. We actually look at any sort of violence or even a threatening action or any behavior that carries any sort of abuse. And when we talk about abuse, we have 5 types of abuse that we identify. So it's physical abuse, there's psychological abuse, there is emotional abuse, and that's what you've mentioned earlier, and there is financial abuse. You can abuse the other adult in a financial way, and sexual abuse. These are the 5 types of abuse defined by health professionals. And when we talk about domestic violence, we mean between adults. And not only any 2 adults who are in an intimate relationship. So if I did anything that's violent against you and we're not in any sort of relationship, so that's not domestic violence. So that's how you completely describe domestic violence in the health perspective.
Okay, thank you for that, Muhammad. Idris, I'm going to come to you. I know there's large shoes to fill right after the expert. Go on.
I wouldn't be able to add anything besides what they already said, except that I would probably say that it's a need for someone to dominate someone else for a particular reason. And I would add on what you said that, in my opinion, more men than are actually accredited and actually receive domestic violence, but of course it's mostly it's not physical, it's mostly mental. More than that's even reported or accredited, because most of the time we have this bravado, we're men, we're supposed to be in control, and so it's usually not reported or dealt with, except for in a lot of times the wrong way. But I wouldn't be able to add any more definition than what they have already given.
Well, that is a good point. I mean, many men that face domestic violence, it's not reported. And even, to be fair, even women, many of the times. And there's a major issue with this in the Muslim community. It's something that's frowned upon, like I said in the beginning, and it's something that needs to change. We can't constantly frown upon women that release this sort of information, what's going on at home, because they're not obliged to live in a relationship in which they're abused. Let's speak about some of the causes of domestic violence. Omar, let's start with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just one cause of domestic violence, one type, and I think maybe it's not mentioned because it's from a Western perspective. I know it's a thorny topic, but it's very important to cover. It's related to using religion to abuse. Because sometimes maybe a husband is going to use like, I am the guardian, and so you have to obey me in everything, for instance. And not only that he can ask some things that are not permissible in religion, but sometimes some things that they're going to burden the other spouse to the extent like she is not going to be able to carry the responsibility. So that can have a load on her, and maybe she's going to feel like, okay, I'm now disobedient to Allah if I don't follow through and do what my husband is telling me. So this one kind, and I think our brother now clarified and said that domestic violence doesn't include also the children, right? Or
No. It's between adults.
It's not included.
These are separate things, and they have different definitions.
They have different mentions.
Yeah.
Okay, but also adding to this, some people they use this for also with children, right? They do this with children.
Yes, of course.
Like
children's abuse.
Yeah. And they're like saying to them, like for instance, I know it's a little bit off topic, but it's also related because it's in the same household. Like you have to obey me, and you have to do everything, and maybe using this as a tool. And my take on this is that if somebody is using religion to, justify that, to have a strong relationship, that means that there is a deep-rooted problem.
Yeah.
Because there are some, underlying problems that must be solved. Because if I love somebody, I'm not going to threaten him, and especially using, religions.
Yeah, and I want to re-emphasize that. I think it is very important, and people do constantly use religion as a sort of blackmail. So we can add a category and say religious blackmail.
Yeah.
And they blackmail either their spouse or whoever with all sorts of things from the religion to keep them within the household and keep all this information, whatever's going on in the household, don't speak out, that's it. If you do, then God will be angry with you, or whatever it may be. But using religion as a tool to continue to oppress somebody else. Which is exactly the opposite of religion, what religion came for. Wa'il, let's
Sure, actually, like trying to prepare for the topic and reading before I came, I went through, quite a few number of hadith and, verses from the Quran. And I concluded that if we're talking about anger and violence in general, it goes through 4 different stages. In the beginning, there is like the situation or the circumstances which trigger the anger, and actually the shaitan or the devil has to contribute a lot within this stage. If you don't stop it, it moves on to the second stage, which is anger. If you don't stop it and control it, it moves to the following stage, which is violence in general, not just domestic violence. And then if you don't stop it, violence could go in different ranges till it reaches evil. The Prophet ﷺ in Sahih al-Bukhari, it's narrated by Abu Huraira that a man went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, advise me. So the Prophet ﷺ answered him, do not become angry and furious. And then the same person kept repeating the same question, and he kept getting the same reply from the Prophet ﷺ. Do not become angry and furious. In another hadith in Al-Bukhari, also narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet ﷺ is perfectly describing the strong person. So the Prophet ﷺ says that the strong person is not the one who can overcome other people by strength, but is the one who can control himself during anger. So if we put this hadith into practice, I guess we will be within the first and the second stage, and we won't reach the third stage, which is the domestic violence or violence in general. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to controlling violence in so many places in the Quran. I would like to refer to verse number 134 from chapter 3, Surah Ali Imran. Allah within the verse says, وَالْقَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, meaning the people who can control their anger. I would like to conclude this part that the Prophet ﷺ, within the Sunnah, he gave us so many tips or prescriptions, and I guess Muhammad will comment on this. He gave us so many tools how to control anger and how to stay between stage 1 and 2 and don't let it go to violence in general. So first of all, the Prophet ﷺ told us when we are in a sensitive situation, we feel that we're getting excited and things are going out of control. First of all, it's very easy to say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah from the cursed Satan. That's the first thing. If this doesn't work, the Prophet ﷺ has a very, I would say, precise and effective hadith in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad. He says, when you are angry, be silent. And the Prophet ﷺ even moves from a theoretical tip to a practical tip. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that if you are experiencing, what the hadith means the following: if you're experiencing an anger, you feel you're getting into a situation and you're standing up, you can sit. And then if it didn't work, if it didn't calm you, so you can lay back. So these are, like the Prophet ﷺ teaching within the Quran and the Sunnah how to control anger and
not to get to the
yes.
third stage. Okay. Muhammad, I want to come to you. I want to know, what would be some of the factors or the causes or reasons why a person would constantly humiliate his partner or try to emotionally blackmail them?
Well, that's a very nice question in this topic. Let me start first by telling you how the scientists and the researchers started to pay attention for this.
Okay.
Well, in the past few decades, and I mean like before the 1980s, there was a misconception by a lot of professionals that it's the one who's getting violated against, like the wives, or even the few number of males, because it's a very low percentage of males who get abused in domestic violence. So there was a misconception that there's something wrong with women who accepts this. Something wrong in their personality. They're kind of submissive. They are dependent, and then suddenly this concept started to change along with research. So they started to find out that, well, it's not about a weak woman or a weak man who accepts this. There's something wrong with the perpetrator. They started to study like the characters and the traits of the people who are indulged in domestic violence, and then they found such things that are common. Not only in the personal factors, because it's a mixture of factors. It's not only personal factors, something that's cultural, something that's economic, socio-economic, a lot of factors. So then they started to discover that in areas where there is poverty, it's very common that you find incidents of domestic violence. Well, and people who are alcohol abusers or drug abusers, it's very common that you might find them as abusers. Again, in all sorts of abuse. I need to remind all of you and our audience about these 5 factors. For example, you can find an alcohol abuser who could emotionally abuse his wife. Okay, that's very normal. Or
it doesn't have to be just physical.
It doesn't. It's not only physical, because back then when they started to do the studies, they started to address only certain aspects, and then they discovered a lot of aspects, hidden aspects, which helped increase the percentage of the people who get violated. So again, it's things in the personality, what we call an antisocial personality. People who are emotionally unstable. Again, certain illnesses like the alcohol addiction or the drugs addiction. Societal factors like poverty. If you go back to history, you might find that this abuser has been abused as a child. That's a very common thing that they found in the studies. So if you were a victim as a child, there's a high incidence that you might be an abuser when you grow up. Again, any sort of abuse.
So these are factors that
These are factors that were studied, and research proved that the main causes of violence. Other factors might be like political issues that might happen in countries. People feel stressed, and this might cause more domestic violence. For example, if you go to the refugee camps, there is a surge in the domestic violence because of the people that who are living in such stressful conditions. So as you can see, at the end, you might find a lot of factors. One of the factors that I like, the point that Omar added, is the religious part of maybe people who might, and that's what I might see in my clinic. So I might see in my clinic someone who says that, well, my understanding of religion, that I can hit her. That's a wrong understanding, that he could do all sorts of abuse against his wife. The last factor that I want to add is the cultural understandings. Like, for example, in certain cultures, and that's what they found, is that it's quite accepted that men might be abusive or might be violent with the women. Certain cultures, it's not only in certain part of the world, on different parts, and this might increase the rate of domestic violence.
Okay.
This sums up all the.
I've written down a lot of these points actually. Maybe we
Yeah.
can touch on them later on in the episode, inshallah. Idris, I'm going to come to you before we go to the break. What are some points you would like to add to that?
Okay, of course I can't add a whole lot after, but the only thing I would add that probably wasn't discussed is probably that in my simplified way of thinking is that sometimes people, a cause is because that person themselves is being emotionally abused by the person, so they react as a reaction to being emotionally. This happens mostly with husbands. The wife emotionally abuses him, and his way of reacting is violent. So it's sort of a reactionary type thing, amongst other factors that they've named, like all I could name, but this is the one that I can think of that wasn't named as a reaction to something.
Okay. That is a good point to add, and we missed out on it.
It's very important.
So there's, all the points that we mentioned. There's various different types of reasons behind domestic violence, and what we want to do is we want to look at some of the effects of these causes. So we'll take a few of them and we'll discuss some of their effects. But first we're going to go for a short break. So as soon as we come back, we will continue our conversation on domestic violence. So stay tuned.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sheikh, I was wondering, can I ask you a question?
Be my guest.
Can I make ijtihad on my own? Is takfir an Islamic concept? Are Salafis a sect? Do I have to give da'wah to people? And is interfaith dialogue haram?
Akhi, this is not one question. These are important topics and issues that require we sit and discuss them, inshallah, thoroughly.
Actually, why don't you guys join us for these discussions on contemporary Islamic issues and concepts?
Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was here today.
This is the Deen Show. 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 This is the Deen Show.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Deen Show. From time to time, we answer some of your questions. We have so many important issues that we're dealing with here on the Deen Show, and we encourage you to come back here every week. And if you don't catch us on the TV station, you can go to thedeenshow.com where all of our shows are there.
It is important for us when we look at the issue of holiday myths that we look at the whole picture. And from the beginning of time, people worshipped the Creator in different ways. The Quran tells us in the chapter of the Bee, Surah An-Nahl, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ.
Maryam, how are you?
Good, alhamdulillah.
Thank you for being with us on the Deen Show.
You're welcome.
So how old are you again?
I'm 8 years old.
I didn't want to get that wrong. 8 years old. And you've memorized how many juz of the Quran?
I memorized 21 juz from the Quran.
21 juz. MashaAllah.
As you know that there is no concept of clergyman in Islam.
There isn't?
There is not.
Okay.
And this idea is supposed to be very liberating. Nobody comes between you and your creator.
Okay.
You do not need an operator. It's a direct call. So Islam rejects the whole notion of clergyman. So a sheikh, imam is a title that is given to a person like myself when the community feels that you're worthy of it. And it's just a title out of respect.
This is the Deen Show. This is the Deen Show. This is the Deen Show. Allah, Subhanahu
Welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing some of the crucial factors and causes for domestic violence. Now, we will discuss some of the effects that domestic violence can have on a person. But before I do that, I want to remind you that this is a live show, and you can call in during you can call in anytime during this show, and we will answer your questions, your comments, your concerns. Also, if you're not able to call, remember that we have Facebook open here, so you can go on to Let's Talk's page, so it's www.facebook.com/Let's Talk Official, and send us a message live on air, and we will try our best to answer it. Umar, if you can start us off with some of the effects domestic violence can have on a person.
Well, that's a pure psychological question, but I think I'm going to talk about it from a different angle also.
Sure.
I think that before saying what are the effects, there is a point I think we didn't talk about related to the one who is imposing this on the other person. That is inferiority, the feeling of inferiority.
Yeah.
When somebody feels inferior, when I feel that I cannot have the control on the wife and so on.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm trying to maybe get her under my control, so that's why I do this. That gets me to one of the effects, that she's going to feel that she is doomed. She cannot get outside. I'm saying she because mostly, I think 92% of domestic violence is done by men against women.
Yeah.
Only 8% is remaining. So my point that I want to raise here is that the feeling of that you cannot have a way out.
Yeah.
So I think here society comes, and I think this is in Quran, the verses after the how to deal with your wife and so on. You have to bring one judge from the wife's side and one from the husband's side, and this is the role of the society, the role of the community, to interfere and to say no, stop. If there are people who are being injustice, so you have to stop here.
Can I just comment or something? You want to say something? Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. I'll add it after you.
Okay, I just want to comment on this, the gender superiority thing. It comes from the lack of the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. I'm not going to get the chance, to talk. I'll touch base on this. Go ahead.
Okay. What I wanted to say, something you mentioned, was society needs to get involved. And this is what I want to speak about after I ask you guys this question, after we go through some of the effects, is that sometimes society is the issue. And it is the reason why people don't want to come out. But which we'll get into later on in the show, inshallah. Go ahead, Wa'il, share your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. I just want to put emphasis on something that a lot of Muslims nowadays, if the lack of understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah and the importance of women and how did the Prophet ﷺ actually deal with women, do contribute a lot to the problem and in enlarging the problem. So if we look, for instance, at the Prophet ﷺ during the farewell pilgrimage, or I would say the first and the final, he only did pilgrimage once, so it was the first and the final pilgrimage. Among 144,000 Muslims, he stood up and he delivered, I would say, his final speech. And while delivering the speech, it was a long speech, and if we're talking about the first part of the speech, there is a whole paragraph. The Prophet ﷺ is addressing men regarding taking care of women and how men deal with women. The Prophet ﷺ says, "O people, fear Allah concerning women. Verily you have taken them on the security of Allah, and have made their persons," meaning the women, "lawful unto you by the word of Allah." The Quran goes to address women in so many places, so many verses, to the extent that there is a whole chapter, Surah An-Nisa, a whole chapter named after An-Nisa, the women. And this chapter, discuss everything regarding women, their rights, their duties, how to deal with them, how to take care of them, marriage, resolving conflicts, divorce, even goes to inheritance laws. For the importance of Surah An-Nisa, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu wa arda, he went to the extent that he used to put emphasis to the scholars that they have to make sure that they teach their family a certain number of surahs or chapters. Surah An-Nisa and Surah An-Nur, which heavily addresses women, was on the top of the list, which he did put emphasis on.
Okay, Muhammad, I'm going to come to you. I mean, I'm trying to move as fast as possible because
Okay.
we're almost out of time and
Running out
there's
of
a lot of things that we need to cover. Muhammad, I'm not trying to rush you, take your time. But at least take a couple of these points and discuss some of the effects it can have on a person.
Well, I'll go back to the first thing that I said. There are 5 types of abuse, and then we can understand the effects. For example, if there's physical abuse, you can understand that the common effect that we might see in our work or our field is that you might find like black eyes, bruises. You start to understand soon that this lady or this man has been physically abused.
Yeah.
So a lot of physical injuries. And by the way, sometimes these physical injuries might escalate sometimes and result into death.
Yeah.
Sometimes people might die because of physical aggression. And this might happen by mistake or on purpose. But that's one of the eventual effects that might happen. The second thing is, for instance, sexual abuse. Imagine like if you have an adult, and again we see this in our practice, who gets like harassed or sexually abused. This causes a lot of problems later on in the relationships, and their of course feeling of security with other men or later on if they get like sexually abused. Again, you go to financial abuse. You might find a lot of people in troubles and might get bankrupt or facing a lot of hardships because of this. If you go to psychological abuse, you'll find people who are depressed.
Yeah.
Sometimes people resort to drugs just to escape from this. But you might find people who start to become alcohol addicts. Again, sleeping pill addicts. They try to sleep to escape anything. And what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. It means like people who get traumatized or get exposed to a heavy trauma, and then they start to develop a lot of psychiatric symptoms, like insomnia, like hypervigilance, like they're always agitated or irritated from any voices. So a lot of psychological things that might happen because of this. So as you can see, the effects are related to different types of abuse.
Okay, so each different type of abuse would have a different effect.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, Idris, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, what would you say are some of the effects that domestic violence can have on a person, or even on a society?
For me, I would once again, this isn't my specialty, so I can only add maybe one simple example of how I see one of the probably the overlaying effects of it is probably bigger than just the people involved, is that it affects those people around them. For instance, children. A huge effect for a mother and a father who are abusing, either way, their children are affected heavily.
Yes.
It affects their education, it affects their outlook on life, it affects their future, it's a huge effect for them. And not only that, also the effect of maybe the community, or the effect of the outerlining family, maybe the grandmother or mother. Everything, these two people affect a lot more than just themselves. So outside of what the more people who know this better than me, that's the only thing I would add, is that it doesn't just affect the people who are directly involved.
Yeah. Let me add a small point to this here, because this is a point that I missed out. As a result of emotional abuse and as a result, of course, of the children seeing this, what happens, as you said, is that they have like self-esteem issues later on when they grow, and that's a common outcome of what they see
Domestic
usually.
violence.
Yeah.
That's interesting how that's connected. And then obviously that can later on lead to
exactly.
domestic violence.
Yes,
That's something you guys mentioned in the beginning, that sometimes I think Wa'il mentioned that sometimes domestic violence is learned from the parents, and then the child carries out that sort of domestic violence as well. Now we can sit here and discuss what people who are abused should do if they're abused and when they're abused, but I want to cover something that's a lot more important, and which is, what should we do as individuals or as a society to help those that are abused? Instead of talking about what these individuals should do, whether they should come out, find help, let's speak about what we can do as individuals, as the viewers watching the show, as a society. What can we do to change this and to return to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to treat each other with mawaddah,
Yes.
with kindness, and how it's mentioned in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
MashaAllah.
has created couples for this purpose.
Right.
Right? So what can we do as individuals? Omar, let's...
Yeah, okay, there's something that popped in my mind. I remember watching some of the videos and reading some books talking about, in the West especially, they are talking about that they have disrupted homes, that mostly they don't have a father in these homes. I think this is one of the main reasons why we're not trained how to deal with women. Because if we don't have this, you don't have this education from your father telling you how to deal with your wife, or how to deal with your sister, or how to deal with the outer community. And they said something very important. When I start getting out from home, and I have single parents, only my mother, I go to school, mostly my teachers are women. So I don't get the feedback from men, the real men I mean, of course, how to deal with women. I only have the feedback from women. So maybe I become a people's pleaser. And this is one of the things. Or maybe I can shut down and I just can go and attack and don't like the other opposite sex. So the main conclusion of this is it starts at home. My father tells me from a young age how to deal with the opposite sex and how to be loving, how to be, to know that you are not superior, as Brother Wael said, and we are all the same in the sight of Allah. I think that starts from there.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I mentioned this in the beginning as well. I think the most important factor for people who are being abused not to come out is society itself.
Yes.
And we need to change the way society thinks. And that would start off with the children. So it's very important for everybody to teach their children, whether it be boys or girls, about domestic violence, never to accept any sort or any form of domestic violence, and at the same time, if they know somebody who's being abused in any way, right, not to see that as something bad that person has done, rather to be accepting and to be open to it, to find out, how can I help you? What can I do to help this person? So this starts from early childhood.
Yes.
It starts exactly, and it starts in the home, like you mentioned, Omar. If we can go to you, what would you like to add?
Actually, I want to refer to what you just said. It was one of the points I wanted to talk about, the word mawadda. If you look at chapter 30, the verse 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and among His signs is that He created for you wives from among yourselves, and that you may find repose in them. I want to stop at the word repose. Repose meaning that you relax or you rest with support. And then Allah goes on and says, and He has put between you affection and mercy. This is another two important terms, affection and mercy. Verily in that are indeed signs for a people who reflect on. So I just want to go over the terminologies used in the Quran. The word affection, the word mercy, and the word repose, which is resting and relaxing and feeling support to your partner. I guess if any abusive partner who really contemplate and think about the meaning of these words would really help him to overcome.
And I think it's like we said many times in the show, that many times people use religion to violate other people's rights, and that's not something that should be accepted. If I can come to you, inshallah, Doctor, what's your thoughts on this?
Would you like to start with this first, so that you
No.
I
would never dare go before you.
Yeah. So when you look at how you can fix things, you have different levels, and your question was specifically pointing to society. We have to look at two sides of this crime, as we call it, domestic violence. There's a perpetrator and there's a victim. So how can you empower a victim that they don't accept this to happen? And this starts, of course, from a lot of things, like concepts in the culture and how to upbring. So when you talk about upbringing, you specifically said that, that's during childhood, and during childhood you go to school and you go to home. So you have your home and school that always contribute to your upbringing. So it's the family who upbrings that you have to stand for yourself, you have to be strong, they have to enhance their self-esteem, as soon as they are children.
Yep.
And you shouldn't accept anyone who would emotionally abuse you. You shouldn't accept any sort of physical abuse. You are not an inferior. You have always to report anything. So that's something that comes within the upbringing.
Of the family.
And the same thing goes at school, that they bring their children at school in a way that they're strong and they could stand for themselves. And they would encourage this. And regarding the society, of course, that's something that should be spread in the society, this general concept. Another thing is that the perpetrator.
Yes.
So the perpetrator, if you, of course, upbring people in a proper way, you don't expose them to child abuse. There's an improvement in how poverty is managed to solve, of course, the causes. As we said, the poverty is one of the main causes. If you have good law enforcement, all of these factors would help. If you are able to control the alcohol dependence, the drugs dependence, all such things that enhance or induce these crimes, then you are starting to close all the factors that are causing this or are increasing the chance of having more perpetrators. So this is how you manage the victim, and this is how you manage the perpetrator, how you can manage things. And then it's expected later on with generations that societies become better and become more accepting and more they have more ability to deal with domestic violence.
Okay. And I mean, one thing that you did mention was that it's important for us to teach the children so that when they grow up they don't accept it. What I want to know, what about people that are already adults and they are already in an abusive relationship? But before I ask you that, I'll come to Idris first. Idris, same question that we were all speaking about right now, which is, how can we as individuals or as a society solve this issue of domestic violence?
I think it's basically echoing what's been said already, but in a different way. It all starts with education, and openness, and educating people about the realities of the situation and how it should be. And I think also another major way to deal with it would be to not really demify or make the perpetrator is he's Iblis. Look at the person who's the perpetrator and as also sort of something's wrong with them, whatever the cause may be, so that when you approach that person, you don't want to treat them as I want to kill them or I want to
they need help as well.
They need help as well.
Course,
This may help people who are being abused be more comfortable coming forward to get help. Because oftentimes the abuser doesn't want to come forward because, strange as it may be, they still have feelings for the person abusing them.
That's most cases.
So they don't want to come out and say, I'm being abused, because then what happens? This person gets beat up, he's thrown in prison, he's abused, and makes them feel bad. So we need to be able to treat the system, treat the people accordingly so that it's a way of becoming out is not a big deal. They feel like they're getting what they need instead of being, the person who's abusing them is going to be abused themselves.
That's a very interesting point, actually. And many times it is the case that the person or the victim doesn't want to come out because the person who is abusing him or her is somebody that they love and love dearly, that they don't want to come out, and they know that something bad might happen to this person. Doctor, I want to come back to you, and like I said, I want to ask you, what about adults? How can we solve this issue for them?
So by adults, of course, again, we have two adults that we might see, and we need to help them in this. So it's the victim and the perpetrator. And that's a very nice point, mashallah, Brother Idris, that you've mentioned, is that a lot of perpetrators, actually, they suffer. They have a lot of issues, and that's one of the things in which they cope with these hardships, is that they become perpetrators. So, of course, this entails us that we need to help them. There's a lot of sorts of like psychotherapies, talking therapies, pharmacological management, sometimes like giving them some medications if they have serious anger management issues, if they are depressed, and that's the way in which they are managing things. So this is the way in which in which we can help. And of course, in other countries, like people in countries in which they have advanced ways of therapy and management, they have groups and they have like social coalitions in which perpetrators gather together and they start to help each other. It's like the self-help groups, the ones like the famous ones like the NA groups, the ones for addiction patients. So we have some groups like for the people who have anger management issues. They sit together and they start to solve the issues together. And sometimes they need professional help, sometimes they don't need. So this is the way in which you can manage. If you have someone who's a perpetrator in your family, you could encourage him to go to therapy, to seek help from others, like adults in the family who are trusted and they have trusted opinions, and they could help them get out of this. And as you've mentioned, sometimes the abused partner is the one who pushes this perpetrator, sometimes in a weakness point or sometimes like that, to get help. On the other hand, the victims, of course, they need a lot of support. They need a non-judgmental attitude while you're dealing with them. Because one of the big fears of the people who are abused is that I'll get judged, that I'm weak, that I allowed this, that I'm the cause of this. And because I have a low self-esteem, I have a lot of problems in talking about things that I'm passing through. So that's how you can manage the people who are already in this issue.
All right. I mean, there's a lot of points I still want to cover, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I'm going to have to thank you guys for coming out here, joining me, and giving our viewers such a wonderful conversation. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, I hope you guys benefited from today's program. Now, after listening to our conversation, let's try as individuals, as a society, to do whatever we can, whether it's to create a safe place for these people that are abused, and let's try our best, if you are abused, that try to speak to somebody that will help. Try to speak to somebody that will listen to you. And it is important that you don't continue a relationship in which you are constantly abused in. So once again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make everything easy for us. And until next time, may God bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I need you. Allahu Akbar. Allah, your mercy is great.